A little while ago, I created a tutorial for a landing page, and I thought it'd be pretty nice to actually take you through the steps of how I would convert this desktop design into a mobile design and go over some nifty little tricks along the way. Let's jump right in. So the first thing I like to do when I'm about to convert a design to mobile is I like to go over to the side here. We've got the grid styles, and I'm just going to rename this to our desktop grid. And with that renamed, I'm just going to open up a new frame. The frame I'm going to use for mobile is actually this Android large preset. And I'm just opening that up there. And now I'm going to create our mobile grid style. So just plus on this layout grid here. What we're after is the columns. I'm going to set these columns to 4. We're after center. And I'm going to set it to 56 pixels width. And the gutter will be 24 pixels. With that all set up, I'm just going to call this mobile grid. Awesome. And you may be wondering why I'm not using something like the iPhone 8 preset or the iPhone 11 Pro preset with that 375 pixels wide. And it's because if you remember from our previous video, we were trying to use an 8 pixel vertical and horizontal rhythm. And our 8 pixel grid system, if we applied it to this iPhone preset, because it's an odd number, we're actually going to end up with half pixels. And Figma doesn't really work very well with half pixels. So if I apply this mobile grid, you can see here how the full width or the 4 columns is a nice multiple of 8, 296 pixels. But if I go over and you have a look at these gutters, it's 40 pixels here and it's 39 pixels over here. So it really should be 39.5 and 39.5. But Figma really doesn't like trying to render half pixels. Obviously, there'll be rounding issues and things. So that's kind of why I've reached for this Android large preset. It's 360 pixels wide, so it's going to be bang on. You can see these gutters here are a really nice multiple of 8 here, 32 pixels. Obviously, it wouldn't matter when the developer gets this into production. The browser will automatically compute whether this is 375. It's just a Figma thing. But without further ado, let's get into some design. So the first thing we're going to need is the navigation. So I'm going to just duplicate this Android large frame, and I'm just going to adjust the height so it's about 100 pixels. Keep that down here. And I'm just going to copy in this coin flip, paste it in over here. That could be about 2 columns. And we'll need our hamburger menu. So if you remember from the previous video, we're using the carbon icon set. So I'm going to boot up Iconify. And I'm just going to search for that carbon preset. Open that up. And what we're after is a menu. So I'm going to search for menu. I'm going to drag and drop this in. Don't want to get lazy with our icons. We're storing them all on that styles page. So I'm going to Command X this. Jump over the styles page, and with the rest of our icons, just pop it in over here. Typically, a hamburger menu is 3 lines, not 4 lines, so I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and alter this. So I'm holding Command and I'm going to click in, going to delete that, and I'm just going to Command Shift click each of these, and then Command G to put these in a group, and then center that off. Now that that's in a group, I'm going to press Enter on my keyboard, and I've got those 3 layers selected. I'm going to bring it up and out of that group just to delete that group. If you remember, Figma overrides work best when it's on one layer. So we've got to flatten these. So that's just Command E with all of these, with those 3 layers selected. Now we have one icon that is ready to go. So Command Alt K to turn that into a component again. And that's ready to use on our mobile page. Shift I to search for those components, and icon menu is what we're after. 32 pixels is a pretty decent size, I think. And the selection color, we're just going to flip this over to our neutral. Pop in these constraints. Also probably worth mentioning, some developers will look at this and just pop it in as 32 pixels. That might not actually be a big enough tap target for production. Normally you want to bump this up maybe 16 pixels so that it's easier to click on. So if you press Shift A, you can put that in an auto layout frame, and you can see how that tap area is much bigger, even though the icon is the same size. So I might actually bump this up to 12 pixels of padding around, clear off that gap, we don't need it. Set up those constraints again, and we've got a much larger tap target. So the developer will see that and see, oh, this is a 32 pixel icon. I should bump this up so it's a larger tap target. And we'll take off this fill. And we can rename this to our navigation. Just drag and drop that in. And that's right on top there. Setting up those constraints. I'm going to rename this to hero. And I'm going to change that fill. If you remember, we put that hero gradient style in there. I'm now going to copy and paste in our little copy lockup. The paste, Control G just to turn on those grids again. And we can just simply drag this in. 296 pixels is what we're after for that full width, that 4 columns. That looks good. So you can see this import field isn't working how we'd like it to. There's not enough width on the canvas. So I'm actually going to delete this. And because the user is probably going to be on their mobile rather than on their desktop or their laptop, I figure we could actually just link straight to the app store for this lockup rather than have the whole send a link process. We can kind of assume that they're just on their mobile device. And we've done the work to put this in its own little frame, so it's just simple copy and paste for this guy too. And I'm just going to press K for the scale tool here. And I'm just going to scale this down into those 4 columns. And just set that to the bottom. I just got to work out a little bit of spacing here. Might make this 16 pixels just equal, or maybe just 8 pixels. Like that. Go Shift A and then center that off. I've put that into fill container. If I close this off to 296, then I'm free to actually pump this padding up. So the side gutters for this breakpoint will be 32 pixels. And that's rigged up pretty nicely. You can see this title is pretty dominating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mobile typeset. Now this doesn't have to be overkill. We probably don't need to duplicate all these styles, but I will list out the styles that we will be overriding for the mobile breakpoint. So if I right click, add a new folder here, I'm just going to call this desktop for our desktop styles. And then for this, I'm going to detach this style and I'm just going to drop it back. So maybe something like 48, 56 pixels. And because we've set up all those constraints, that's resized nicely for us there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create this as a new style. And I'm going to call this mobile header 1. Beautiful. So now we've got 2 sets of styles. So just in the handover, you probably just got to mention that we're not going to override all the styles when we go to desktop to mobile, but a couple of the styles where it makes sense to really tighten up that type scale, we're going to override. So in this instance, we'll just override the header 1 type style for mobile. Up to you if you want to center this off. We set this auto layout to center, that'll center the button. And if I command click and then command shift click these 2 text layers and hit center, there's our centered off hero. Now for our strap, pressing F, we'll boot up that Android large preset again. You know the drill, apply the layout grid, mobile grid, and I'm just command clicking, copying, pasting. I'll paste that in. And if we hit Shift A here, we can set this to fixed width, and we're just after the fixed width of that 360. If you remember, we're going for 32 pixels as the gutters. So I'm just going to quickly set the background to our blue. And now if I command click on that text layer, I can set this to fill container and that'll fill nicely. Rename this to our strap. Now if I highlight these two and hit Shift A, we've got a similar rig to our home page where we can have each section isolated. Clicking on frame 2, set that gap to 0. Now I'm going to call this homepage. Right, coming down to our next section, we've got this icon grid of 3 icons, each coming up with using up 4 column spaces. So we've got a decision here. If I copy this and paste it out, so as we get this down to mobile, we have a decision whether we want to stack this or if we want these to be the same size, we could actually move these into something like a slider where you'd reveal the first and a little bit of the second to give a little bit of an affordance that it is actually a slider. So we're going to go for the slider rig for this one. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to duplicate this strap. Rename it to icon grid. I'm just going to bump up this gap to something like 56 pixels. And we can set that background as surface and delete our text layer. We've got our nice little text lockup up the top there, so just paste that in and setting that to fill container. Now for our icon list, I'm going to copy this, same deal, paste that in. And now I'm going to set that parent frame to fill container. We want this to scroll on our prototype, so if we just go over to our prototype tab, and on this overflow scrolling, we set it to something like horizontal scrolling. When we hit play and view that in the mobile, this will scroll across. But if you looked at this, you wouldn't know that it is a slider. So we've got to give a little bit of a peek so that people can see the next icon feature card. So I'm just going to enter down, and right now I'm selecting all 3 icon features. And if I adjust this width here, I'm going to adjust it to the 3 column width. So I measured this before, it's just 216 pixels. So if I turn on that grid, you can see how that's just perfectly fit into our 3 column width right there. Now the gap needs a little bit of adjustment. We've got 32 pixels here, but our grid gap on mobile is 24 pixels. So you can see how that's perfectly starting on that 4th column there. And that should do us for the icon feature. Now it's time to move on to the media feature. So the first thing I want to do is just highlight all these elements. So I'm shift clicking and I'm going to put these into a frame. So I'm going to go Command Alt G. I'm going to hold Command here and I'm just going to set it to the size of the image container that we've got there. You can probably rename this to image container, something like that. And now that's ready to be moved. So again, I'm going to just duplicate this icon grid and rename it to media feature. And I'm duplicating it rather than starting it each time, just so that we have that auto layout pre-set up and that mobile grid applied. I'm going to enter in and just delete these contents. We will start with the text layer. So I'm going to copy this over, paste that in. Again, just popping that over to fill container, and that's perfect. And copying this image container, I'm going to paste this, drag it out, and I'm going to press K for that scale tool. And if we just inspect here, the full width here that we're looking for is 296 pixels. So if I jump back here with that scale tool, I'm going to just drag this down till it's bang on 296 pixels. Oh, close. 296. Wonderful. So now that that is set up, we can just drag and drop that in. Beautiful. I'm just going to duplicate this down. Again, selecting these elements. So I've got this little symbols. I've got that circle, and clicking on the image. I'm going to create a frame with Command Option G, holding down Command just to trim this to the image. It's ready to move. Just Command C to copy that. Command V to paste. I'm dragging this out. Rename this to image container. And I'm going to pop it down to that 296 pixel breakpoint. Beautiful. Command X, Command V to paste it in here, and we can just delete that one. So no account keeping fees. I'm just going to Command C, Command V, set to fill container. I'm going to delete that. And I'm just using the arrow keys here to swap these around. It's really nice. Now we'll make a quick note here that we're actually going against how the browser would naturally collapse things up. It's good to keep in mind that when a browser reacts responsively and it's collapsing things up, it'll go in the order of its DOM, which is the document object model. The DOM would lead with the image, and then the next HTML element will be this text div. So if the developer was to just simply set each of these elements to 100% width on the mobile breakpoint, it would actually come out looking something like this, where you lead with the image because the image is on the left, the text is on the right here, so the image goes on top and then the text falls on the bottom. And because we've got these reversed, the browser will then put the text on top and the image down the bottom. Now, when I first started out doing design, I would actually try and honor how the browser would stack these elements so that it makes it a little bit easier for the developers. But to someone reading this text, it doesn't make sense to lead with the image and then the title, and then lead with the title and then have the image down the bottom. You don't know which image is associated to what bit of copy. What the developer will actually have to do is set the flex direction of one of these sections to flex direction reverse. And I think we might reverse out the top section, but that's just a personal choice. You could actually lead with the image. And if we led with the image here, in this instance, the developer will be setting flex direction reverse to that bottom image. So that's just something to keep in mind while we're converting a design from desktop to mobile. You want to be setting the elements to the left of the page on top and the elements on the right of the page towards the bottom as we stack these frames. But I'm going to lead with the title for this one, like we have for the other sections. Now let's move on to reviews. So I'm going to duplicate this again, so we get that grid and auto layout set up. I'm going to enter in and just delete the contents of those. If we click on this layer, you can see that our reviews section is using that neutral background. So I'm just going to set this over to neutral. And of course, rename this so people don't get confused. This is our reviews section. This copy, I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste. I'm going to set it to fill container. It's just going to be the full width. And now for the reviews. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it over. And I'm going to set this to fill container. So I'm going to actually just hide that bottom row on mobile. It's going to be a little bit overwhelming, especially if we put this in a slider. So I'm going to do a similar design how we've done up here, and I'm going to put the reviews in a one row slider. So I'm going to enter in, and what I'm looking to do is set the width of these reviews to the width of that 3-column breakpoint, which is 216 pixels. So clicking in, enter, then enter again. We've got the reviews selected, and we're setting that width to 216 pixels. Just going to delete, clicking in, I'm going to delete that blank one. We actually don't need this review group anymore, so I'm going to drag this reviews list outside of that. And I'm going to delete the review group. I'm going to have to set this to fill container. And I'm going to set the starting position of this slider to the left there. You can see that I've made a little bit of a mistake in the previous video. I haven't set that title there to fill container. So I'm just going to double click in, go back to our main component here, command click on this name, and I'm going to set that to fill container. Now if we return to instance, and you can see that's wrapping a little bit better. Double click into this reviews list again, and we're going to set up the prototype for horizontal scrolling. Reviews section done. Now I'm going to duplicate this off again. You know the drill. Enter in, delete this. Let's inspect this, back over to the design tab, and then we're going to select that footer gradient. Beautiful. Double clicking in, copying that component, pasting it in, setting it at fill container. Again, we're not going to need this phone number input field. Our users are already on the phone. So I'm actually going to delete that input and delete that description text. We're using a header 1 text style for here. So I'm going to move that over to the mobile heading 1. Just fits a little bit nicer there. And I'm just going to copy and paste our button component into our little copy section here. Let's center that off. Perfect. Now this navigation. So copy, paste that in, set to fill container. And I'm actually just going to change the orientation of these. Rather than it being set to a horizontal direction, let's flick that over to vertical and just tell Figma to hug those contents. And just a gap of something like 32 pixels. Same thing with these terms and conditions. We'll set this to a vertical, all nicely centered. Let's set these to fill container real quick. Fill container. You see the padding's just gone a little bit crazy here because we've copied and pasted it from the desktop. So I'm going to readjust this to maybe 0 pixels. And we'll just have to center this off. So we've got that logo frame, press enter, center it. Little thing that annoyed me on the last video, I forgot to capitalize this. Terms and conditions. And that divider, I'm just going to copy this, go into our navigation auto layout and paste it in there. Just chuck it up the top there, set that to fill container. And I think that's all the pieces, folks. So with the way that Figma presents prototypes, if we click over here, we can only set a device per page. And that's why I split out my pages by breakpoint. So this is our desktop breakpoint here, where we don't set a device. And I'm going to Command X this home page, create a new page in here. It'll be design, B2, mobile. I'm going to paste that in. Now we can set that to the Android large device because we've set the width early on to the Android width. And back to that prototype, set it to gray. And for the background, I like to set it on a muted color. So I'm just going to grab that hex code there, pop it into the background. So now if we hit play, we have got our mobile app. You can see how those nicely playing. It's rendering a little bit of a line here, which is a bit of a glitch on Figma's part. Set it to surface to remove that line, and I will just go down here. I might have to wrap these in their own frame just to get that over to the neutral. Yeah, great, no line there. Having a look at this on device, I think this button's a little bit too close to the image. So I will just bump up the padding on this element here. Get a little bit more distance. We can set this gap to 0 just to simplify it a little bit more. Maybe just a little bit. It's a little bit better to me. It's pretty funny. You'll get clients that say, why isn't this flush? We can probably offset this just a little bit. But when they tap it and it gets a bit of a focus state, then it becomes clear that it's not flush. Can't really win with that one, so you just got to choose what you think looks best. Awesome. And if I just have one little touch up for the padding, I might actually bump this up to something like 48. Get a bit more clearance. And you can see those sliders are working pretty nicely. And now that it's all in place, we can probably delete this style guide and just run it again with automatic style guides, generate style guide, just to get those new desktop mobile styles. And now that this design is ready to present, we can just click Share Prototype. And the settings I'm setting up here is anyone with the link and can view prototypes only. And then we've got allow viewers to copy, share, and export from this file, so I will uncheck that. And I have these options because I'm on a premium Figma plan. If you're just on a free plan, you'll only have this can view option and you won't be able to deselect these advanced options. So just having that can view prototypes only, it means that when they're looking at this, they won't get this open in editor option. So you can click share prototype, anyone with the link can view prototypes only, unchecking advanced options, and now we can just copy that link. And then that's the link to the mobile design. Similarly, we will also go over to the desktop page, hit play, and we'll also need to provide the desktop link. So same as before, share prototype, and it's remembered these settings. These are global for the file. Anyone with the link can view prototypes only. And it's globally unchecked the allow viewers to copy, share, and export from this file. But now if we click copy link, it will just give us the link to the desktop design. And there you have it, guys. That's how I would convert a desktop design to a mobile design in Figma. If you have any questions, please leave a message for me in the comments below. And until next time, happy designing.